Welcome to the Gratefully Yours Wine Podcast. I'm Jim Campanini, co-host of the show, and we're happy to have back the wine butler, Mike Pigeon. As you can see, he picked up a great white tan, for the last week. He's been up in Rye, New Hampshire, lolling around. I didn't give him the vacation. He just up and left me last week's show, and but we're glad to have you back, Mike.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Did you enjoy the time off?
I did very much. Yeah, I did.
Good.
Nice to be back with you.
Well, we missed your wine expertise,
You maybe missed me a little bit, but not my expertise. That's still missing.
Wow.
But I'm still learning.
Yeah, well, we're happy to have you back, and it's August, and oh man, things are going by fast, but we still got a lot of great wines to drink, and we got a special guest today. But before we talk about our special guest, I want to tell you a little about where we are. We're at, this is the InsideLowell podcast. It's coming to you from our beautiful WellPoint Studios in downtown Lowell. WellPoint, the only health plan offering healthcare benefits exclusively to Massachusetts GIC members. At WellPoint, your whole health is their whole point. Okay, so yes, I told you about a special guest we were going to have last week. I told the audience, and we have him on a Zoom call today. Jason Arabian. He's the owner of the Big River Lodge and Winery in West Greenwich, Rhode Island. Now, I've been down there a couple of times. That's where my brother John Campanini makes his famous Zinfandel. But Jason was the impetus behind all this, and he's been a big wine fan, motorcycle collector, which maybe we'll get a little into that, and Jason give us a little tour of his motorcycle museum, which it'll really blow your mind away. But it's his winemaking skills and the camaraderie at the Big River Winery. I attended, like I said, a couple of times, and I was just impressed with a group of people coming together. Jason brings out food trucks. Sometimes he makes his own food. He's got a great ragu sauce, he and his wife and stuff, and they just do a great job. It's an all-day event, So without further ado, I want to welcome Jason to the show. Jason, how you doing?
I'm doing very good. Good morning, Mike. Good morning, Jim.
Well, I got the wines this weekend. Thank you for dropping them off at my brother's house. We've got one of Jason's homemade Merlots. I'm showing you right here. A fascinating rosé that he made this year, and a Sauvignon Blanc. Look at that color. Beautiful color, straw golden color and stuff. So we'll taste these during the show. But let's begin by, Jason, just give us a little a background on yourself, okay, and the history of your winemaking.
Certainly. First of all, thank you for having me on. It's a pleasure to be here. My career outside of winemaking started off really in construction and project management. And then about 20-something years ago, I made the shift to information technology and owned an IT support company. But one of the things that kind of shined as my hobby and some of my passion was winemaking, which started with a friend down the road, Earl Ferguson. He was living in Exeter at the time, and we started making wine at his house right around 2003, I think was our first year. And then over the years, Earl moved out of state, and we were making wine at my house, and then eventually it migrated to what it is today. But back in those days, it was really nothing about the wine. We were buying grape in bulk. We were crushing it. We were adding some yeast. We were hoping it fermented, and more often than not, we ended up with one of three products: either gasoline, salad vinegar, or occasionally, a drinkable wine.
Well, it's a testament to your passion that you guys didn't quit there. You persevered. And how did that happen?
So, the first couple of years of doing it, I was actually trying to make wine from grape on property here at Big River Lodge, which is naturally overrun with Concord grape,
Yeah.
which you can imagine is the wrong grape to make wine from. It's better for jams and pies, but I didn't know anything back then, and gave it a go. And then over the years, it kind of slowed down. Earl moved out of state, and I built the Big River Lodge next door to where I was living, and I got rid of most of my wine equipment. And then Earl visited one day the Big River Lodge and said, we need to start making wine again. So that kind of restarted the process in 2014. I think we had let it breathe for a few years. And this time when we started, it was only 3 of us for the first 4 or 5 years, making wine either in the rain, all day long. We were drinking as much as we were making. So you can imagine it got a little sloppy at times, but we eventually buckled down and just tried to follow some simple science. And there's a few steps every winemaker should do at the very beginning just to make sure you don't end up with salad vinegar or gasoline. And, number 1 rule is cleanliness. You got to be extremely clean. The number 2 rule is you got to understand the makeup of the juice. So some simple tests will tell you what's in there for sugar, what you're going to yield for alcohol, and that's when you make your adjustment. And from that point on, for a hobbyist home winemaker, it gets pretty easy if you do those first 2 things.
Okay, just let me interject here. Now, people, our audience are watching. So you talk about the Big River Lodge. I've been to your impressive home and land. Just tell them this is just describe the lodge. It's what's the square footage there? It's a beautiful place. Very rustic looking, but sharp, and it could be it could be a bed and breakfast, But describe it.
Well, it is a log cabin. So it is a log home made of real 10-inch logs. So it has an automatic, rustic appeal to it, just simply for that reason. And some board and batten design along with the logs, so you're not overpowered by the logs. But set in a very nice private landscape, well off the road, not visible from the road. And really, when you're there, you wouldn't know if you were in Rhode Island, New Hampshire, Wyoming. It's very secluded. The finished and conditioned space in the house, including the heated garage, is about 8,500 square feet. Wow. So it is sizable. But that's due to the amount of finished space, the entire basement. And then there's a big loft above the garage that sleeps 9, where our guests stay during events like this.
It's a beautiful place. It's a beautiful place. That's why when you hear the name Big River Lodge, I mean, it is quite an impressive site. And Jason opens it up to all his winemakers. And how many people, and I was grown from your 3 with Mr. Ferguson and all the way, how many would you say annually participate in your winemaking process?
So it was the 3 of us for a number of years, and then we ended up joining forces with your brother, as you know, which is a little story in its own. And I think when we started counting how many people in the first years that we were together, it was in the 30s. At 1 year, just before COVID, it was about 75 people. Yeah. So we consistently get a 40 to 50 plus turnout, and a lot of that varies on, the date, because we don't predict when the grape will be ready. So that pushes our event sometimes into October, maybe even mid-October. On certain years where grape is ready early, it could be end of September. So we keep our schedule open. I petition your brother to keep his schedule open, but not everybody can. But it is an open house event. You show up when you want and you leave when you want, and there's no official starter or stop when it comes to visiting. So. And like you alluded to, we do prepare some food, and we start at 9 usually, and I gotta hold the guys on the wine team back and really get them to slow down and not just bang this out, because it is an event. People love to come and take a turn at the press. They love to take a turn at the crusher. Everybody gets the chance to clean because there's plenty of stuff to clean. But we do our best to extend it from 9 a.m., till about 2 or 3, when we are legitimately finished, and then we clean up, and then we do nowadays we do a couple drinks over here at the Thirsty Chicken, which is inside the Big River Motorbike, the British Motorbike Experience. And then whoever's still left, we open our house for a pasta dinner. So everybody's well fed on their way home. And hopefully, if the year before goes well, we have plenty of wine from last year to drink during this event. I like to call it a one-year wine. So the wine we made last year, my hope is, pretty close to the end of the event, we'll be out of wine and ready for the new stuff. So because we're not using any preservatives, I usually suggest a year and a half is probably as long as you want to keep it. Yep. But it's meant to be enjoyed.
Yes.
Right.
Well, going back to what was the transformation from you used to get the juice and you were making wine, but when did you start buying your own grapes? And you've had that the same connection for a long time, right? You buy them from California, the grapes. And does everybody put their order in, like, for what they want to make? Like, my brother does Zinfandel exclusively. You've been the most ambitious. You've spread out. You made a Merlot. You now you're doing Rosé, Sauvignon Blanc. You've tried Cabernet in the past, I know. So when did that transformation take place, and how has that gone?
So I've always done the grape, and probably because, again, in the very beginning, the wine was just the byproduct of the camaraderie and the fun of doing it together. It didn't start off as a serious winemaking endeavor, and we loved the process. We loved crushing the grape. So we were getting it, out of some other distributors in Providence, which are very hard to pin down, very hard to get what you want, and very hard to even get, an order in or buy, unless you're really well known to them. But Anthony Moretti, out of Silver Lake Beer and Wine Supply in Cranston, was like a godsend and a haven to those of us who weren't making massive amounts of wine. And, your brother was buying his stuff from him. And I think after so many years, Anthony started buying the grape and bringing it here to Rhode Island. So we do have the ability, because he has a concierge service, to put in an order. So on the first order, I'll put in my reds, knowing I got to crush them and let them sit a week. Then my second order, I'll pick up the day before press, which will be the grape I'm going to use for my whites and my rosé, because as you know, it's a different process. But he has allowed us to, down to the case, I want 5 cases of this, 10 cases of that, and he has just about everything. So I've made Zinfandels, Merlots, Chardonnays, Viognier, you name it, we've tried them all. But I'm starting to back off more on the reds and get into the lighter stuff. I think next year we'll do a little less Merlot. We're going to do a lot more rosé, because that seems to be the popular one. We'll do a white, and I might do an orange wine. Yeah, where you let the white sit for a week in the skins.
So how many pounds of grapes are you crushing? Do you think this past vintage?
So I'm doing
your biggest
about
vintage. What was it?
Probably about 40 or 50 cases, and I think it's 36 pounds a case. So if you do the quick math there, I mean, we're yielding typically around 150 to 180 gallons of wine.
That's a lot of juice.
And then your brother's order is pretty static. He's ordering old vines in. Yep. And only old vines in. That is all he makes. I played around with the different varieties, and I think I'm down to the ones that are maybe a little easier to work with, maybe a little less complex, that yield a better product. Because again, the focus is really the day. And the event, and it's not just one day. I mean, there's the crush the week before you're pressing. That's right. You're crushing and pressing the lighter ones the same day, and then you've got 4 or 5 times throughout the year where you're either racking it, which is removing the sediment, eventually bottling, which we may not do in one swipe. So we're together a good half a dozen times throughout the year, in smaller groups, working on this wine. but it's nice to be able to do that and at least have something drinkable to show for it.
And
So
everybody
again,
who makes wine, like if one of your, because like my brother's got his own team, even though you guys all work side by side and share thoughts and stuff. And most of his, his family members who are your cousins too. And then he's got his fraternity brothers from URI who come by and help out. And so if someone in your group, say, wants to make their own wine, you allow them to do that, right?
if someone, because the way I normally handle it is, I'm purchasing the grape and I'm making the wine, and I, just like your brother, basically give it to everybody.
Right.
But if someone says, I want to do 10 cases of this, so I get, 5 or 10 gallons of something, absolutely happy to let them do it. I mean, it just probably means making more time on the press, but we have the time, and we can always get another press. And with that many bodies, there's a lot of labor to help. And one of the benefits to working with John and doing this together, even though we're doing our own thing, there's some knowledge passed between the two, and there's a lot of equipment sharing. There's a lot of supply sharing. If I don't have something and I need it, John's probably got some extra in one of his bins. If he needs something, I've probably got it. So it really makes the day a little less frantic if you're missing something. So
Jason,
that's been terrific.
Just for people out there who might want to become, try it as a hobbyist and stuff. I mean, and what would you say the startup cost? Because I've known through the years you've bought a lot of equipment and upgraded. But to get started, what would you think the initial investment, a press? And then, like I said, you guys don't use steel tanks or wood barrels. You use what, the glass, the big plastic vessels and stuff. So what would the initial outlay be? Do you think you need a press? You gotta press those grapes. You can't crush them.
You gotta press those grapes, and an interesting story in the very beginning. Your brother was not pressing grapes with a press. He was squeezing it by hand to get the true handcrafted label on his wine.
His hand print was all over it.
It was really hard to watch, and I felt bad for his crew. Holed up in that Sisson Street garage, which was covered in plastic.
That's right. I remember. That's right.
They were all wearing Tyvek suits like they were in a clean room. But it was, and I did get your brother to agree to use the press, but he gets impatient, wants the press time early. But, the press is a necessary investment, and you can get a small press very inexpensively. We've got a very old press that was passed down from someone's family that I think might hold, I'm not sure, it probably holds 10 cases of grape. Mm-hmm. So it is a sizable press, but manageable for us to move around and put in the basement when we're done. Places like Anthony Moretti's and Silver Lake Beer and Wine will actually rent you a crusher.
Oh, okay.
And granted, he's only got a crusher or two, so it goes out and comes in. But a manual crusher, again, is very inexpensive. And then we have an electric crushers too, but we do that because when we're pressing the reds, when we're crushing the reds, we just want to get it done. It's a Friday night, it's a handful of us, and it's really the start of the process. But when we're crushing, when everybody's there at the event, everybody's using the manual one so they can become part of the process.
Do you have a destemmer? Do you have a destemmer? Because I remember one year going down there and pulling the stems out, and, with my...
So the destemmer is part of the crusher.
Okay.
And we talk about my time in Italy. I'll let you know the two different sides of how they handle that out there. It's a little different. And I decided not to retool and get any more equipment, but we use the plastic food grade buckets, which are very easy to maintain, very easy to clean. I use the glass carboys. Your brother uses the plastic carboys, for the various stages of crushing and pushing down the must and fermentation. And aside from that, the rest of the equipment is really minimal. Airlocks, good cleaning agents, which they all sell for different stages of the process and to help you. And then, there's a million things you can buy to add to your wine to improve its longevity, to change the taste and the smoothness. I mean, your brother employs some of those regularly. I try to do as little as possible and just kind of lean on the natural flavor from the grape, aside from those first few steps.
Now, the other thing I notice is you've got some great bottles. Bottles are an expense, and your corking is really nice and tight. Like, it was very consistent. Last night when I pulled the corks on, those things came out really nice, but they were tight, and the fragrance just came right out of the bottle. So I could tell there was nothing being lost in there. And so tell us a little about that while I pour your rosé, and then we can get into talking and tasting some of this wine here.
Yeah. So we made the switch maybe 2 years ago from the traditional cork, pulled from plugs from a cork tree, to the synthetic corks. The synthetic corks have a little bit less of a failure rate, and because they don't actually soak up the wine, it's just they don't have that tendency to dry out. So the great thing about, probably the best thing about a synthetic cork is you can store the wine standing up. Whereas with a regular cork, the idea is you want to keep it on a little bit of an angle so that cork stays moist and does not dry out.
But you bought a machine. Did you buy it? You bought a machine, right?
It's just a hand corker. We have a couple of them.
That's it. It's
a very quick process, but again, one of those things that people enjoy doing when the time comes that we're bottling. But the story is that back in the early day, when again we were making wine with no science or no thought, sometimes we were bottling too early. Fermentation wasn't finished. There would be a secondary fermentation, and that would mean that there would be a morning where you'd wake up and you'd say, "Boy, it smells great in here. It smells like wine." And then you'd go in the basement and realize that a bunch of your bottles exploded. And because they're laying on their side, the wine is everywhere. So I'm probably a little scarred by that, which is why I like the safety of the synthetic cork, because I can stand it up, and if a bottle does blow, the amount of liquid coming out of the bottle onto the floor is minimal. So that's my own personal journey on the corking.
All right, so I've poured the rosé. Tell us about your Italian experience. How you got into rosé, because rosé for the last 5 years has been the rage, one of the best-selling wines all across the world. And the big thing is, while the French model from Provence, they were the ones that really brought it forward. But now everyone across the world is making rosé, and they're doing it from their native grapes. It's just not the French grapes anymore. And so tell us a little about the process, your experience in Italy, and Mike and I are going to taste this.
So my rosé journey actually begun in the province of France, where we visited, I think it was 2018. And in the province, that's what it's known for. We visited a number of wineries. We visited every restaurant. Every yard you looked in had some grape growing that they were making rosé from. Rosé is pretty much the staple there. And that got me thinking, I'm making wine. I could make a rosé. And the trick is with a rosé to crush it and press it immediately, like you would a white. Yeah. The drawback to doing that is you get about 30% less yield than if you were making a red, where the red grape gets to sit all week. So you get a little less yield, but the idea is you get a lighter wine. And there were some years where our rosé was light. There was some years where it was a ruby red, still had a wonderful color, but nowhere near as light as I saw in France. Now, the French don't share very well, when it comes to winemaking, at least in the province, in my experience. But when I went to Italy, they were very open. We stayed at a place that was a winery and a bed and breakfast and a little villa when we were in Florence. And I said to them one morning, they said, tomorrow we start pressing the grape. And I said, well, what time do you start? And they said, well, 6 a.m. I said, well, I'm going to come down, put me to work. I think they were shocked that I actually showed up, but they put me to work, and I got to work in the big tanks with the big equipment. But as I visited the different wineries there and spoke to the people that we knew and told them about my rosé, they told me I was using the wrong grape. I was using Zinfandel, thinking that it was a nice light red grape that I could get, locally. And they said you should need to switch that to probably a Sangiovese, which is the basis for most wine in Italy. So I took heed to what they said, and this year we made our rosé is 100% Sangiovese, and you can tell the color is much lighter. Well, you can't tell, but much lighter than it had been in previous years, and has a very nice pinkish red hue when it's in the glass.
It's beautiful color.
This year we did something a little different because of an issue we had with our Merlot, which we'll talk about later. But I ended up purchasing a small filter system, which pumps the wine through a set of filter pads. And when you apply that process to a red or to a white or a rosé, it starts to sparkle. That's what they call it. The wine sparkles. So it takes out the finest of sediments. And it's a 3-step process, 3 different grades of filters, but you get a much clearer, crystal clear white and rosé. And I'd say for the most part, 90% of the bottles we have reflect that crispness and that clarity.
Well, I just want to say that, what a different taste from the first taste last night, because you even suggested open it up, let it sit for a while. Well, just being in the refrigerator overnight with that little spacing where it got some oxidation has transformed this into a nice, the taste is much better today than it was first opening yesterday. It's got a nice sweetness right at the beginning, but it's fruity. It's not sweet. It's not sugary sweet. It's got that nice fruity, but it ends dry, just like I like my rosés, and it flows very, very well. What do you think, Mike?
Very nice. I find it to be a little more orangey than red.
It does. It's got an orange tone to it, orange hue.
Yeah,
it does.
Perhaps,
almost like a peach. A peach.
There you go. Peachy's probably good.
Yeah,
but you are correct that and I always warn people when I give them a bottle of wine, and just to frame it properly, it's a homemade wine. Yeah, it's not a 95-point wine you're going to get at the Capitol Grill. But it is very drinkable. But it does transform itself within an hour and longer. And I think, it becomes a better wine. And I find that true for all of the varieties I've made. And it's very interesting. I learned, you pick up all these things when you go to Italy. One of the things that I came away from Tuscany loving, was a Brunello. Yeah. And I had been attending seminars and wine tastings with the same shop owner, both in the U.S. and Italy, his place in Italy. And for the first time on my 5th time at one of his wine tastings, I heard him say something I had never heard before. And he said, if you really want to truly enjoy the Brunello, you need to uncork it 4 to 5 hours before you're going to drink it. Mm-hmm. And I just said, that means that every bottle I'm ordering in a restaurant and I'm drinking it, 20 minutes after they open, I'm not getting the full experience. And so it's changed the way I order, but that same logic, I think, applies to what we're doing here, on the home front. And I appreciate you pointing that out, because it is. Can I give you a
suggestion? So if you've got a favorite restaurant you go to and you've got a good relationship with the owner or the waiter, you call in advance. You say, Joe or Sheila, we're coming. I'm taking my wife, a couple of guests. We want the 2010 Poggio Antico, and I want you to open it right now, decant it a little, and just tell them, open the bottle, leave it there. We'll be there at 6 o'clock. That's what you do, because
That is-
we go to some restaurants. We do the same thing. Mike and I have been drinking now my 2010s, which are absolutely phenomenal. That was a classic Brunello year, you know. And you talk about the ageability of Brunello. Those wines, you know, I've tasted them at different 5-year intervals, and now that 2010 is so elegant, smooth, the licorice. You know, it's just the fruit is still there, but it's evolving. That's what I like about, like you said, Brunello, Barolo, even the Amarones that I drink. You know, but
on
you're
my list of things I need to do. Call ahead and
call
pay
that.
for that bottle and have it open. That'll make me a true Italian Spaccone. I feel like
Although Mike,
I'll do the family proud.
Mike, even better. A couple of years ago, Mike and Judy, his lovely wife, took my wife and I to a great place in Groton, Philos, right?
Philos.
Where you bring your own wine. So
There you
and
go.
they do the beautiful Italian meals, and we bring a wine there. But that's good. But this is a great, and you know, for our audience out there, as Jason was explaining the process, when you make a rosé, it's the free run juice. So the color comes from that little initial contact with the grape skin. And Jason also pointed out, you know, for his red wines, the color becomes deeper because it spends more time on the leaves or with the grape skins, and then you can recrush the grape skins to act more extract. But that is the beauty of the rosé. You crush it initially, and that's it. And then it's just a fabulous wine. Like Jason said, the French really. You know, with the great innovators on it, but the rest of the world is caught up, including Italy, Spain, Portugal. They're all making great rosés from indigenous grapes. But this one, Jason, what do you think? Pretty good, huh?
Very nice. It must be exciting every year to take your first sip when you do it yourself.
Yeah.
It's because there's no additives or anything. It's it. When you have your wine, that's it.
How many bottles or cases did you make of this, Jason?
I crushed 10. I think it was 10 cases. So I ended up with 20 gallons. 20 gallons of the rosé. And I think, you know, this year I'm going to do a little more rosé. I'll probably do 20 gallons, you know, and that yields about 2 cases per 5 gallons. So, you know, you're getting about 8 cases of wine. My math is correct.
Yeah.
So, you know, pretty good. And like I said, I'm gonna dial back a little on the Merlot because I find more people are enjoying the lighter ones. There's still a crowd that loves the reds, but we're gonna try that orange wine this year. You know, which is something I was exposed to a lot in Italy. You know, which is interesting. And I can talk about that when you're drinking your next glass.
Okay, now I want to go back to my initial question because you didn't answer the question. You gave us a lot of explanation. The investment, like if Mike and I wanted to start hobbyist winemaking with a group of people and we could share the costs and everything, what do you think to get started and not to make the volume that you make, but maybe turn out a couple of cases? What would you think for equipment and everything, the initial investment? $1,000 you need or less?
I think it's probably around 750. You know, because you're making small, so you probably need you know, 10 buckets.
Yeah.
You probably need the small crusher and the press, and then the miscellaneous stuff. You know, the bottles are probably the biggest expense, but you know, sometimes in our house, especially in the beginning and during the holidays where we're drinking the young wine because everybody's over and just loves it, we'll put it in a 2-gallon airlock bucket with a spigot, and because it'll go over the course of 2 days.
Yes.
So it depends upon how you drink it, really.
Yeah.
But that if you're going to drink it fast, you can do something like that. But you know, $750 to $1,000, you know, across a couple people is probably the right spend. And you know, I think if you're really frugal and tight, you can produce a bottle for, you know, a couple dollars a bottle.
Yeah.
You know, maybe 4 or 5. I think ours, you know, given the nature of how we do things, might be a little bit more.
Good. Now, I know also my brother, Johnny, asked for the bottles back. So it's not
He
like
asked for the bottles back, but I listen, I gotta say, I know he was on the show, talked a little bit about our wines. He, despite the unorthodox methods that we witness sometimes, he makes an incredibly good and consistent wine that anybody who drinks absolutely loves.
yeah.
My challenge with them is, you see our bottles there. You see we are well labeled. We
Yeah.
got some versatility. They're handwritten, but they're consistent. He presents his wine a little differently. He's got great names, Crossing the Rubicon.
Yes.
He's got great descriptions of the grape, a lot of detail of where it was made. He's got a story of how this wine fit into history that makes you want to drink it just to feel like you were Caesar crossing the Rubicon. But they're
He's
they're
big into
white
Italian
labels.
history. Ruben
They're
is.
not lined up. The fonts are sloppy. Sometimes we go over the other labels that were returned to him. So, what I have suggested to him is he take our logo and we make it Campanini wines,
nice,
and I would
nice.
let him use this logo, and without a licensing fee for probably 2 years, and then he's going to have to pay a licensing fee. But he makes a fantastic wine, and I think if we brought up his presentation, I think he'd have all four corners nailed.
Well, it's funny you say that, and you're right, exactly right. John is just sometimes stubborn, but I think he's going to come around. But I have the original bottle he made in 2003. He put Kathy, his wife Kathy, on the label. I think it was 2003. It could be 2006 because he called it Mia Casa. He just put some words on it, but it's got Kathy's picture on it. I just got it hanging on the wall there, as a bottle. But he's on. And then the other time he put it one year. The name was Legion 10. I said, "What is Legion 10?" He says, "Oh, that's the name of the famous Caesar's famous legion. Never lost a battle." I said he just comes up with these names. But all right, moving on. Tell us a little about the Sauvignon Blanc and how you made this.
I stayed away from the whites for the longest time because I was under the impression they were more work. And it turns out they're actually a lot less work than a red because you crush and you press immediately the same day. And then you need some patience as those wines sit there and you got to wait for that sediment to knock down. So, a glass carboy or a plastic bucket of freshly crushed and pressed white wine is gray, like a gray concrete soup. And but after 30 or 40 days, you start to see that sediment move down, and you eventually end up with, just by the patience of time, an incredibly clear white wine. So overall, the process is actually easier. I do find, my palate finds a tremendous difference across the varieties, much that's easy for me to call out than with the reds. Like sometimes I have a hard time, really embracing the difference between a complex wine like a Merlot or a Cabernet. Whereas with the whites, I can immediately tell the difference between a Riesling and a Sauvignon Blanc or a Chardonnay. So we've had a lot of luck with them. I'd like to take credit for it, with all my winemaking skill, but the reality is I think 99% of the work's done by just the grape. Fabulous.
Well, I think you stick with this Sauvignon Blanc. I think it's got the bones to get much better. For some reason, I taste that nice. I get that nice a slight grassy aroma, which is a common trait, but not as much grapefruit, and a lot of minerality. Have you detected that minerality?
So. Yeah, and that's something I learned at my time in Italy, that flavor comes from, the soil. Mm-hmm. So typically we're getting ours from the same vineyard in California, but every now and then it's a different vineyard, which, could make my Sauvignon Blanc one year, taste, really minerally, and another year have some other fruits or flavors to it. So the one thing we're
No,
not consistent here
it's very
is the
drinkable.
vineyard.
It's very drinkable.
Yes.
I'm just saying.
It is very drinkable, and there's a pause with that because there's no preservatives,
Right. No,
sulfates.
yeah.
The effect on the body is minimal. So
Yes.
people tend to call it a magic wine because you can drink a fair amount of it and certainly be feeling the effects of the alcohol, because it does pack a tremendous punch, and not feel the headache or any of the issues the next day. So that becomes a little dangerous.
Do you measure the alcohol levels? Do you measure the?
We measure the alcohol levels when you're doing the that first step of science. Your brother, writes down what he's getting. I'm just dialing in so that I know that I'm gonna get a good wine with a good alcohol. And it's really, I'm not reading what the alcohol is, because to me it doesn't matter if it's 12.5 one year and 11 the next year. You should be pretty consistent if you have that sugar to juice ratio proper.
No, this is I wouldn't guess what it is, but it's very well balanced. It's still got that crisp acidity, but it's not overwhelming. Some Sauvignon Blancs with that so much grapefruit, I can only have like half a glass. I just can't. It gets too acidic. This is very harmonious. Yeah.
Yes. Very.
Even
very
right
nice.
across. So it is a nice drinking wine, and I would definitely have some nice oysters with that. It'd be great glass for oysters.
It does pair well. That was probably the biggest thing I learned in Italy. They say you never go into a bar and see someone sitting down drinking a bottle of wine alone, because that's not how they treat wine over there. Wine is food. It's meant to be paired, and it's meant to be shared. So that is what we embrace in our operation, is we want to pair this and share this with friends.
Yeah.
And that's why it's really more about the event and the process than it is about the wine. But again, nice to have a little bit of byproduct that tastes pretty good.
All right. So far you're 2 for 2. We're going to try the Merlot. Tell us a little about this Merlot and why you might be dialing it back. Why are you dialing? Why?
So I'm dialing it back because I'm personally drinking more of the rosés and the whites.
Okay.
And we end up, the last thing I want at the end of the year is 8 cases of Merlot or Zin. I'd rather have it be the stuff that the people around me drink. The reds I usually had great luck with the reds, but it's a longer process, so a lot more can go wrong. You're sitting there for a week sometimes, and you can't remove every stem unless you have enterprise level equipment. But some wineries in Italy are now making wine with the stems in, feeling it's natural to use every single part of the vine. But that can sometimes give you a little bitterness.
That's right. Yeah.
So we have we struggle through those, because some years there's more stems in there. Some years you got to remove all the bad yeast. I like to remove all the bad yeast, add my own cultured yeast so that I'm getting good yeast. This year, our Merlot started off with a fantastic color, unbelievable taste, but a horrendous smell. And you almost couldn't get past the smell to get the glass to your mouth. And this is where you're forced to do some research or throw away 30, 40 gallons of wine.
Ouch.
And what I found was most likely the cause was bacteria. And bacteria exists in wine to certain levels naturally anyway, so it's not a problem, but certain bacteria has an adverse effect on some of the senses. The answer to that was that filtering process we talked about earlier with the white and the rosé. I was able, through the course of 2 stages of filtering, to actually filter out 99.9% of that foul smell. It removes all the smell from the wine, but it does not remove the flavor. So we're able to keep the good and get rid of the bad. Now, hopefully I never run into that issue again where you have to filter to save the wine. Filtering should be an option if you really want to clarify and get that crystallized look to it. But that was the struggle we had this year with the Merlot. And the grapes, again, you're crushing on a Friday, and they're sitting with their must for 7 or 8 days, in which 3 times a day you got to push the must down. That attracts fruit flies by the billions. If you don't airtight lock it like I do, your brother just covers it with a tarp. All this is done in my garage, so while I get to take care of his wine for him during the week, I also get all the fruit flies that may come with it. It's a lot of labor, and we do our best to make sure everything gets done, but that responsibility falls to me.
I've had, this does have a funky aroma, okay, profile, and I've smelled other wines, red wines, including Merlots, that sometimes have had that aroma. And yes, there is something, but you've been fortunate, like those other winemakers that sell it for a living, it's a drinkable wine, and it's a beautiful color. The color is just absolutely gorgeous, and the taste is there. So I don't know where you bought if the grapes could have been, the smoke tainted. There's a lot of stuff that went out there that they put on the market, that just got out there. It's good enough. And because some of those grape growers were struggling, no one would buy their grapes. So who knows? But it could be from something that you had nothing to do with, obviously, because the flavor is there. The color is absolutely gorgeous. It's just got a little funky smell. And
a little bit, yeah. It was a lot worse. But to that point, I mean, our grape comes from California. So it's 10 days on a train, between the time it's picked and probably the time it hits Rhode Island, and then it could sit in a walk-in cooler. So in Italy, that's a cardinal sin. Yeah. They harvest and crush immediately, and when I told them sometimes I'm 10, 12 days, they almost had a heart attack, and I can understand why, but that's the price of getting grape out of California versus the Northeast type vineyards. Yeah. It's just a little different, but it does come out well typically.
You did a great job with the Sangiovese on the rosé. I think you should consider making your own Sangiovese, the red.
I might, because it is easier to buy and sort all the different grades, because when you're doing 4 different varieties, everything's got to be separated. You don't even want anybody switching covers. It's easy to get mixed up, so not letting it get too complicated and dial. But again, like I said, this year, I think the orange wine will be our new endeavor, simply because I think it'll be fun to make, and we're doing that process for the reds anyway, so it might as well let it be a little of the whites.
Beautiful. All right, so now this is a multi-dimensional Big River Lodge here. So why don't you tell us a little about your fascination with these beautiful motorcycles? You're a collector, vintage motorcycle collector. Tell us a little about that, and then maybe we can close the show with you giving us a little tour of
sure.
How did this start?
Well, I had motorcycles when I was younger, a couple of Honda Cafe racers. I was, very into that. Sold them when I got married, and then in 2010, I felt like I wanted to do, have a motorcycle again. So built another, which turned out to be an award-winning cafe racer, just in paint job and style and engineering, and started to dabble more and more, and said, I really would like to own a couple more, maybe collect some motorcycles. And I'm not really into the Indians or the Harley Davidsons, and I started looking at the British motorcycles, and there were over 500 different British motorcycle manufacturers. If you made toasters in the 1920s, you also made bicycles, and then most of those companies also made motorcycles. So there's so many to choose from. And my first couple were what they call thumpers. They're single-cylinder motorcycles, and there's a romance to riding a single-cylinder motorcycle. That's all you have to rely on, and they've got the classic motorcycle look. And I said, I enjoyed buying these online. I went to a couple auctions over there and enjoyed myself immensely. And then I said, well, I can't buy every motorcycle at the auction, so I'm gonna carve out a niche and just collect what's called pre-war singles. So they are single-cylinder motorcycles made prior to World War II. That is still a great classification for everything in England is pre-war and post-war, and that's how they really define anything and its age. So I did that to limit my collection, which still ended up to be pretty sizable. I think there's 20-something pre-war motorcycles in the collection. I built a special showroom for them that put them back in their natural environment, which would be pre-war England. So we have all the things you would find in pre-war England. We have a country pub. There's a service station. There's a dealership, a motorcycle dealership, and a toffee and sweet shop. So, and that's where we house the pre-war singles, but we do spend a tremendous amount of time here in the Thirsty Chicken pub. It is nice having your own pub on the property. And then the other half of the building is all the other bikes I've collected that are post-war and not necessarily singles. So there's quite a variety out there as well. But this has been a nice addition to the property. And, as the sole proprietor to the Thirsty Chicken pub, which is not open to the public, it's great. Nothing gives me a more heartwarming feeling than to see this place packed with the 20 people it can hold on wine day or any other event at the house where we come up here and we pretend we're in the UK.
Unbelievable. Can you give us a little tour of
Sure. I can give a slight tour and keep things steady here. So we are inside the Thirsty Chicken pub, which you can see has a wonderful bar, which is actually from England. And then, of course, you've got your traditional beams with water stains like you'd find in any good old pub, and some windows, with no glass facing out into the street.
Look at those motorcycles.
And if we take a step outside into the pre-war showroom.
Oh,
now I do have.
You did this all yourself.
Yes, I did have some friends help me with, some of the carpentry work, but this is basically me and one of my friends, 4:30 every day, back again after work till 9 o'clock at night.
Oh my God!
There's a good shot of the Thirsty Chicken pub with its thatched roof.
You don't, Jason, you don't do any of that restoring yourself, though.
I do some of the maintenance and fixing, but I'm trying to buy them restored or, and part of the challenge is there's just no parts for these things over here in the U.S. They're all in the U.K. They're really hard to find. Yeah. We do have some windows that open up, shutters that look over the big down to the Big River Lodge, but we have those closed today because our landscaping crew is here. Then what we'll do is we'll come in here at night and we'll shut the big lights off and just keep the lights on in the storefronts. And we play a soundtrack of vintage motorcycles and you actually feel like you might be in a pub at night. So you can drink here all day.
That is great. That is great.
And then this is the workroom. This is where we technically say we do work. These are the post-war bikes, and any bike that is not a pre-war single. And we've got, of course, a number in here, and then the workshop where we do some work. We do some work. So, the barn's come a long way in a couple of years. This was built in 2020. We have a nice homage to the TT race in the Isle of Man, which is the world's most famous motorcycle-centric event, probably, and some words from an old renown. My grandfather, the man who loans tools is out. We do not loan out tools here at the Big River, at the British Motorbike Experience. But
go check.
So this is this is the finishing. I get a lot of suggestions that perhaps we should try to make wine up here and move the operation to the barn. But this is pre-war England, and this is motorcycle centric, and I think the winemaking's best left to the lodge environment.
Well, Jason, that is, you've given us a fabulous adventure and experience this morning. You're multi-talented. Keep it up. I know you've built a great core of people there. Hopefully, I can attend the Crush next year. And but I wish you the very, very best. This has been exciting, huh, Mike?
What a show. I
Yeah.
loved it.
Yeah.
Great guy.
And I will talk to Johnny Camp, my brother, about those labels. I think he got a great idea there. Help him out, and we'll push him over that stubbornness and get him into the into the 21st century with his labeling. So.
We've made a lot of progress over the last couple years in general with him, so I feel good about this. And listen, thank you both, Jim, Mike, for having me on the show. This was a lot of fun, and you're both welcome, whoever is, to come down. Our dates should come out in the next couple weeks as we understand what the harvest looks like in California.
Okay, Jason, may the wine be with you. Thank you, buddy.
And also
Have a great
you.
day.
Thank you, gentlemen.
Thank you, Jason. A pleasure.
Take care.
Have a great day.